And hopefully everybody's seeing our preview of a total solar eclipse. Ooh. So the eclipse hasn't happened yet. It's still in the future. So I'm doing the next best thing, and I'm showing you a photo of a previous total solar eclipse. So this is the kind of thing we can expect to see for a couple of minutes on Monday, April 8th, if things work out in our favor. Nice. And this is a snapshot from the last time the United States experienced a total solar eclipse. Anybody know, for a bazillion bonus points that don't actually count, when that was?
2017.
Oh, you folks are unstoppable. Nice. And if you have really sharp eyesight, you might notice the caption at the bottom gives it away. Yeah, this is the last total solar eclipse that reached the United States. The last time anybody in the US got to stand right in the moon's shadow. That was back in August of 2017. So in August of 2017, we here in Northeast Ohio only experienced a partial solar eclipse. And it was a lot of fun, but actually getting to see a total solar eclipse can be another degree of a fun experience. So here's what we're going to cover tonight. What to expect on Eclipse Day, which, as we said, is Monday, April 8th. A little bit of the science behind eclipses and why and when they happen so that you can help share them with your friends. Some history on when this has happened in the past and some predictions of when it'll happen in the future. And, some tips on how to view it safely. And then I should also mention, why should you listen to this clown who's talking about eclipses? Who's your presenter? So I'm Chris Mentrek, and like Tracy said, I work for Geauga County's version of the Metro Parks at a place called Observatory Park. And so being an astronomy educator is a big part of what we do, and it's a ton of fun. And I'm really excited that we finally get to talk about a total solar eclipse. But okay, just in case anybody is completely brand new to this, a total solar eclipse is, very simply, it's when the moon blocks our view of the sun. And for a few brief seconds, we lucky earthlings get to stand right in the moon's shadow exactly. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's something that doesn't come around every day or every week or even every year. It's maybe, if it, depending on where you live, it might be a few times in your life experience. And here in Northeast Ohio, it's definitely been a once in a lifetime experience that we get to see one of these. Nice. So, all right. Just to make sure, on the background on eclipses, this way folks are ready to answer anybody's questions about eclipses and why they happen. I've got a question for you. What are the 3 ingredients we need to make an eclipse? Every eclipse needs 3 outer space ingredients. We're thinking, oh, you're thinking much too hard. This is an easier question than ever. Well, you need a sun, and you'll need a moon, and then the gimme, usually it's down below your feet you'll need an earth. Nice. And so anytime those 3 things or any 3 things in outer space line up, this is a great vocabulary word. It's called a syzygy. I'm sorry, I'm a collector of great vocabulary words that are for good situations. But yeah, 3 objects aligning in outer space, any 3 objects, and that's called a syzygy, an S-Y-Z-Y-G-Y. Oh, I love that word. If you can play that word in Scrabble, that's a guaranteed win. You can just knock the board over and walk away. That's a great word. So yeah, eclipses are one kind of a syzygy, and if you live on planet Earth, there are 2 kinds of eclipses that we can experience. What are those? I'll turn it over to you folks.
A partial eclipse?
Oh, very nice. I'll give you the high 2.5, Mary. You're halfway on your way to a high 5. Well, we
Okay.
can see eclipses of the sun and eclipses of the moon if we live on planet Earth. So those are called solar eclipses and lunar eclipses.
Lunar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, sort of, we've had one of each of those this month. There was just a very, very, very partial, I really don't want to oversell just how partial this was, lunar eclipse, on last Monday on the 24th. And not coincidentally, there was 2 weeks before the total solar eclipse. So eclipses tend to come in groups, one of the moon and one of the sun, about 2 weeks apart. And then they also tend to come in groups about 6 months apart. So if you can imagine the Earth orbiting around the sun, they take place once on one side of the sun and then once on the other side of the sun. So I'll turn it over to you folks. If we're going to have a total solar eclipse on Monday, April 8th, here in April, what would you guess was the month when we had our last chance to see a solar eclipse of any kind? It should be about 6 months before April. So wait, April's the 4th month. Yeah, it was in October. Yeah, so in October, we had a chance to see our last solar eclipse, and now it's eclipse season again about 6 months later. That's kind of fun. So yeah, here on Earth, we name the eclipses after whatever looks like it goes dark. So if we see the sun go dark, we call it a solar eclipse. If we see the moon go dark, we call it a lunar eclipse. And that's all there is to it. We're expecting a solar eclipse. So let's talk more about those. Now I'll turn it over to Mary Jane. There's two kinds of solar eclipses, partial and total. Nice. So partial just means, like it sounds, the moon only blocks part of our sun. And a total is when the moon totally blocks the sun. Things are lined up perfectly. And for the total solar eclipse, I'm showing you that same picture from 2017 that was taken in Oregon, the last time the US had a total solar eclipse. But on the left, I'm actually showing you a Northeast Ohio photo of a partial eclipse from back in 2014. So partial eclipses are a lot more common than total eclipses. And so we've had, I'd say, about a half dozen partial solar eclipses here in Northeast Ohio in the last 10 years. But it has been much longer since we have had a total solar eclipse here. So I always like to make my standard joke, and feel free to borrow this if you like jokes that make little children groan. I'm partially excited about partial eclipses, but I am totally excited about this April's totally solar eclipse. Nice. Okay, so if an eclipse is an example of a syzygy, an alignment of the sun, the earth, and the moon, it's gonna be important to know what the moon is doing to figure out when and why eclipses happen. And that's why I'm showing you my favorite animated cartoon showing the orbit of the moon around the cartoon Earth. And so if you look at our Earth is half lit up and half not lit up. And there's a very fancy scientific jargon term for the side of the Earth that's lit up by the sun. It's called daytime. And you will never in a million years guess what the technical term is for the side of the Earth that is not lit up by the sun. It's called
Nighttime.
nighttime. Yeah. People like to overcomplicate this, but it's as simple as that. The Earth has a daytime side and a nighttime side, a side where the sun is shining and a side where it isn't. Now, the exact same thing happens with the moon. The moon has a daytime side and a nighttime side. And as the moon orbits around the Earth over the course of one month, that's where we got the word month from. We took the word moon in English and we stapled a page onto the end of it. Yeah, it's a moon. There are a lot of languages where the word moon and month are the exact same word. In English, we just kind of added a little th to the word moon to get a month. Okay, so this shows you about every 29 days, one month, the moon will orbit around the Earth. And as it does, we see different amounts of the moon's daytime and nighttime sides. So last weekend, we had a great view of a fully lit up daytime side of the moon. And it was a fully lit up daytime view of the moon. So we call it a full moon.
Full
Yeah,
moon.
that's all a full moon is when we only see the moon's daytime side. Now,
Okay.
in 2 weeks after the full moon is kind of the opposite of a full moon. And that's where the moon is kind of in between the Earth and the sun. And that means if you live on planet Earth, you're looking at the moon's nighttime side, which makes the moon very hard to see because good luck spotting the nighttime side of the moon up against the darkness of outer space and the glow of the sun. And if I were in charge of the names, the opposite of a full moon would be called an empty moon. But I'm not in charge of the name. So the opposite of a full moon is called a new moon. So those are the only two moon phases when eclipses can happen. Only when there's a full moon and only when there's a new moon. So based on what you folks know, of those two, a full moon and a new moon, which one of these would you guess is the only moon phase when we can see a solar eclipse, where the moon can block our view of the sun?
Full moon.
That's a good guess. Do you want to take another shot at it? You were very close.
Well, it would be the new moon then.
It would be the new moon. Nicely done. We're totally right. All right, let me see if I can doodle on this. We can only experience a solar eclipse when there's a new moon like this. I'm going to draw a terrible picture here. If you imagine you're on planet Earth and you're trying to look at the sun, the new moon is the only time when the moon can get in the way.
Yes.
Yeah. And now just for funsies, the only time we Earthlings can see a lunar eclipse where the moon can be in the Earth's shadow and go dark, that's during a full moon. It's kind of fun. So lunar eclipses happen when there's a full moon. Solar eclipses happen when there's a new moon.
There's a new moon.
Nice. And for me, it's always tricky to understand, especially when they show you, this is the kind of picture here that's always printed in your science book when you're in elementary school. And I guess
Yeah,
it's easy to print because it kind of shows all the moon phases. But for me,
right.
adding an element of motion with like a little bit of animation, that really helps me visualize where the
Oh,
Earth.
yeah.
So a solar eclipse, like I said, is when the moon blocks the sun. It can only happen when there's a new moon, but I've kind of oversimplified things here. I just made it sound like there should be a solar eclipse every time there's a new moon. But pretty obviously there isn't, right? We've all been alive for more than one moon, and we know that there's not a total solar eclipse every month. So what gives? All right, well, the truth is my handy cartoons here have oversimplified things a little bit. That's the downside to cartoons. For one thing, we've kind of not shown the real scale of the solar system, and we also have made it look very two-dimensional, very flat. And in reality, our solar system is a little bit more 3D than this. And that's part of the reason why we don't see eclipses every month. There's a
Yes.
slight tilt between the, as we say, the orbital planes of the Earth and the Moon. The planes that we and the Earth move in around the sun is tilted about 5 degrees compared to the plane that the Moon orbits in. So you're right. If they were completely in line, every month we would get a solar eclipse, and then we would get a lunar eclipse, and then again and again and again, and we probably wouldn't even get out of bed for a solar eclipse, let alone consider it a special event. But because there's this tilt, there are only special rare occasions. If you want to look up your fun diagrams online, they're called the nodal crossing points, where the moon and Earth's orbit combine, and you've got to be right at those places to get an actual total solar eclipse lineup. So you might imagine those are kind of rare. And that's one of the things I really like about living on Earth is it's rare enough that we get to see an eclipse. It's a rare special occasion, but we also live on a planet that gets to see eclipses. I mean, other planets don't have the same kind of luck. If we lived on Jupiter, we would see several eclipses every week. So in this series of photos I'm showing you, there are 4 eclipses happening on Jupiter right at the same time. So between the fact that Jupiter has dozens and dozens of moons, many more than the Earth does, and that its moons are all very flat and close to the same plane as Jupiter as it moves around the sun, Jupiter gets tons and tons of eclipses. Like I said, several a week. I don't think we would get out of bed to watch an eclipse if we lived on Jupiter. But here on the Earth, how many moons do we have?
One.
Yeah, just the one. That's why we can get away with calling it the moon. So it's kind of a big deal. And it's also kind of fun living on the Earth because we get to see total solar eclipses. Our moon is just the right size and just the right distance away from us to sometimes totally block the sun. Some planets don't get that. On Mars, all eclipses are partial. There is never a total solar eclipse. And here's one of my favorite series of photos. This was taken by one of the robots on the surface of Mars. And that robot, all alone on another planet, got to watch a solar eclipse on Mars
Oh, okay.
when one of Mars's small moons crossed in front of the sun, but it couldn't quite totally block it out. The moon's just a little too small and not quite close enough to the robot to block the whole sun. But Earth is right in this sweet spot. Our moon is just right to cause total solar eclipses every once in a while. Nice. All right, now this is when you usually get a question, especially if you are talking to members of your family who might be in elementary school. So they know that the sun is much bigger than the moon, but they'll ask, well, how can the moon block the sun if the moon is much smaller than the sun? And there's a handy trick to that. It's that the moon is, yeah, a lot smaller, but it's also a lot closer. And my favorite way to show this, if you want to try this out, go ahead, hold out one thumb and close one of your eyes, and then see if you can get it to cover up something in the room that's bigger than your thumb. Maybe a clock on the wall, or maybe the screen that I'm on here. I'm going to block all of you folks out. So you can cause, an eclipse of me or an eclipse of the clock, eclipse of the window. You can even block out your entire friend if you hold your thumb close enough to your eyeball or camera. Yeah, so that's a great way to share with kids. Is that, yeah, just by bringing it close enough, even a small object can block an enormous object. Your tiny thumb can block a skyscraper if you hold it close enough to your eye. And the same thing's true with the Earth and the moon. Our moon is about 400 times smaller than the sun, but it's also about 400 times closer to the Earth. So that works out pretty well. And this is one of those things where you don't get a sense of that in those great cartoons of the Earth, moon, sun system that I showed you earlier, because space is a lot bigger than that in real life. There's a lot more empty space. So it's really hard to get a sense of just how spread out the solar system is. So here's my best way to try and show that. Here's one of the rare photos taken from far enough away from the Earth that it actually shows the Earth and the moon next to each other in real life. And it's at the bottom of your screen here. And you might check in the bottom right corner of your screen. So it might be covered up if you want to move your zoom window around. There's a tiny little glimpse of that moon over there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so this was taken by a robot that went out to the asteroid belt, and it looked back at the Earth and got the picture of the Earth and moon next to each other. But the way I like to share this, so if you made your Earth the size of a typical marble, the moon would be about the size of a pinhead, and they'd be about a little over a foot apart, about 14 inches apart. And this is great because that's big enough that we can all hold it in our hands, and it's nice. You can see a marble-sized Earth and a pinhead-sized moon. But the tricky bit of this is getting a sense of how big and how far away the sun is. So at that scale, with a half-inch wide Earth, anybody want to guess how big the sun would be? We'll take random guesses. It's all right. I had a poor understanding of this. And that's about as big as a beach umbrella is wide, about 4 feet, 8 inches across. And it would also be really far away. So, like, if we tried this trick inside the Mentrek library, if we were meeting in person, and we had a marble-sized Earth and a pinhead-sized moon, we wouldn't even be able to fit the sun into the library. It's so far away at that scale. I measured when we went to the library. It would be, if you stood in the library's back parking lot, the sun would have to be across the street to give you a sense of how far away they are in real life. 93 million miles in real life, or at this scale with a half-inch Earth, about 490 feet away for our model sun. So that's a lot of empty space, and getting something as small as the moon to line up with and block that sun, that's a rare occasion worth celebrating. Oh, nicely done. All right. One other question that you'll probably encounter when you're sharing eclipses with family and friends. And it's, well, doesn't the distance to the moon change? Is it sometimes closer or farther away? And doesn't that affect how eclipses look? And it totally does. The truth is, the distance to the moon, between the Earth and the moon, it changes by, about 10%. Or if you want to memorize one number and carry that around in your head, I like to remember that it's about 3 times the Earth's width. That's how much the distance between the Earth and moon changes. Changes by about 3 times the width of the Earth. And that's really not a lot of a change when you think about it. It's makes one full moon look very similar to most other full moons. But every once in a while, that means when an eclipse happens, the moon will be slightly closer to the Earth or slightly farther away from the Earth. And that can be just enough of the difference between whether or not we get to see a total solar eclipse, where the moon can totally block the sun, or a special kind of partial solar eclipse, where the moon can't quite block the entire sun. And there's another great fun word for this. I love it. It's called an annular eclipse. Ooh. Annular is another great word. Syzygy was great. This is another great word. Annular. And it just means ring-shaped. The last time planet Earth got one of these annular eclipses was, not coincidentally, 6 months ago. Back in October of 2023, North America got to see an annular solar eclipse. And here in Northeast Ohio, I should say, we had a chance to see a partial solar eclipse. That particular day, well, it was a complete rainout where I was at Observatory Park. I don't know about you folks. Did anybody get to see this eclipse back in October? I think it was raining for most of us here in Northeast Ohio. Like I said, so annular eclipses are pretty fun. And this is another one of those shake your head moments where if you're hearing about this on the news, I've turned this into a fun game I've played with my family members and coworkers. Every time you hear a newscaster use the word annual instead of annular, you get to give yourself a point. I know the words annular and annual look pretty similar, but they are not the same. Annual means it happens every year. Annular means ring-shaped, and they're
Okay.
not the same thing. They're both things that, go around in cycles, but that's about where their resemblance ends. So there's a couple of handy ways I've shared for people to remember that word annular is different than annual. For the wildlife fanciers, earthworms are a kind of animal called annelids because they have ring-shaped bodies. Or if you're like me and you're a fan of big, long, boring books, you know that the title of The Lord of the Rings in Spanish is El Señor de los Anillos.
Oh,
That's the
Neos.
word for rings. Yes, anillo and annular. Those are ring-shaped eclipses. Very nice. Not the same as annular. That's one of my bugaboos. All right. Well, we had that chance at an annular eclipse back in October, but enough about that. Let's talk about the future. The total solar eclipse coming on April 8th, 2024. Here's what to expect. And so once again, I'm using photos from an old total solar eclipse to stand in for what we're expecting this April. This is from that same 2017 total solar eclipse, but in Kentucky, where it was total. And I like it because it's a good, honest photo of what it feels like during a total solar eclipse, right when the moon is totally blocking out the sun. And it's dark enough, you'll notice that you can see the lights on everybody's cell phones as they hold up their cameras to take pictures of the eclipse. But it's not quite, oh my goodness, the darkest pitches black dark you'll ever see. A lot of times, photographers will take pictures of the eclipse zoomed in up close, and that can make the sky look a little bit darker than it will in reality. So I like to compare it to about as dark as the night sky gets on a night with a full moon. But the big difference there is that a full moon will cast nice sharp shadows. And one of the creepy, eerie phenomena of a total solar eclipse is there really are no shadows. The sunlight is so diffuse that it doesn't really cast shadows.
no.
Phew, it's kind of fun. I really like it. It's kind of an eclipse twilight, and it's not quite the same as everyday sunset twilight, not quite the same as a full moon. It's hard to find a comparison. It's just a really cool bit to experience. Okay, so on April 8th, here's what we're going to get. The moon's shadow is going to come across North America from southwest to northeast. It'll come across Mexico and then across the United States, just where we're showing you this line on the map. And then it goes on across eastern Canada, crosses Newfoundland, and then it's back out into the ocean and the eclipse is over. So the moon's shadow is only a little over 100 miles wide when it's crossing North America. And so only places inside that special band where the moon's shadow is going to travel are going to get a total solar eclipse. Everybody else in North America is just going to get a partial solar eclipse, which is kind of fun because I don't know about you, but my house is right in the line of this totality. So yeah, if you live anywhere in Lake County, you are guaranteed to get a total solar eclipse. And the same is true of Geauga and Cuyahoga and Lorain counties. Some of our nearby counties are going to be just on the edge of the moon's shadow. So if you know anybody in like downtown Youngstown, invite them on over to your house because they're just outside the zone of totality, but they might as well come on over here and check out a total solar eclipse. Nicely done. All right. And this is my other favorite way as a Clevelander to visualize just how fast the moon's shadow travels. Like I said, the moon's shadow is going to be going from southwest to northeast. That's also the path that the Red Line rapid trains in Cleveland follow. And so I just wanted to see how long is it going to take the moon's shadow to cover the same distance as the Red Line trains in Cleveland. And the moon will cover that distance in, like I said, about 25 seconds. It's pretty fast. The moon's shadow is going more than 2,200 miles as it sweeps across Ohio. So it's kind of a fun bit that it's going to be going right through our backyards. All right. So like I said, it's kind of a rare event. If you live in Northeast Ohio, this is a once in a lifetime event that there has been a total solar eclipse in Northeast Ohio. The last time Northeast Ohio, especially Lake County in particular, got a total solar eclipse was way back when the state of Ohio was only 3 years old. It was back in June of 1806. And I think none of us were alive then, right? Yeah, so on the one hand, on a planetary scale, if you think about the entire Earth, total solar eclipses aren't that rare. On average, we get a total solar eclipse somewhere on Earth about once every 18 months. But a particular location like Northeast Ohio might have to wait more than 200 years for the next total solar eclipse to roll around. All right, that was our past total solar eclipse here in Northeast Ohio. When's the next time Lake County and Mentor are going to get a total solar eclipse after 2024?
24 or something or other.
Nicely done. Yes. Air high five. Yeah. It's 420 years from now in the year 2444. So if you mark your calendars now, you will definitely be prepared. That's the next time Lake County and Northeast Ohio get to see a total solar eclipse. We'll be in the moon's shadow on a fall afternoon on September 12th, 2444. So yeah, we've got 420 years to wait for our next one if you are staying put. Although I should mention the fine print. If you're willing to do a little bit of traveling, you can get to another Ohio total solar eclipse before then. In 2099, there's going to be a total solar eclipse that does reach Ohio, but it just barely misses Lake County. But if you don't mind traveling a little bit and heading on over to Columbus, oh, that's another eclipse that folks might want to make. I plan to live forever, so I'm setting my alarm for the 2099 total solar eclipse here in Ohio. That should be fun. And like I said, we haven't had one of these total solar eclipses since 1806, but I should put the asterisk on that. There have been two almost total solar eclipses since then. So here's the full fine print. The last best eclipse that was almost total was back in 1994 when Northeast Ohio had its last annular or ring-shaped solar eclipse.
Yeah.
It got nice and dark, but we never were totally exactly in the moon's complete shadow. On that day, the moon was just a little too far away to totally block the sun. So we only got a partial solar eclipse. That's kind of fun. And I should mention there was this one other total solar eclipse back in 1925 where the moon's shadow went through Lake Erie, but it just barely missed Lake County in Ohio. So that was an almost total solar eclipse. That's the one near miss we've had since 1806. Oh, good stuff. All right. Well, enough about thinking for the years ahead. What are we going to see on Eclipse Day? And here's our handy simulated time lapse, like a comic strip, showing you what the entire eclipse will be like. So our entire eclipse is going to last about 2.5 hours on the afternoon of Monday, April 8th. It starts almost exactly at 2 o'clock and it ends almost exactly at 4:30. I know it sounds like you're just making rough estimates when you say 2 o'clock and 2:30, but I mean, literally, we're predicting the eclipse will start in Mentor at 2 o'clock, 0 minutes, and 5 seconds. I mean, exactly 2 o'clock. And it'll end at about 4 o'clock, 30 minutes, and 45 seconds. So really, just about 2 o'clock to 4:30. But the part that people are most excited about is that few minutes of totality right in the middle where we're totally in the moon's shadow. Oh, nice. So that was the still version of what we're expecting. Here, if you please, is a simulated video view of what the entire eclipse will be like. But instead of making you wait 2.5 hours to see the entire thing, here it is shrunk down into 1 minute. So it'll start off with what looks like the moon coming in from the right, like a partial eclipse for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And then right in the middle, just over 3 minutes in the moon's shadow of totality. And then the moon appears to move on and gives us another 1 hour and 15 minutes of a partial solar eclipse until 4:30 when it's all over. Nice. That should be great. So I've summarized that here so you don't have to watch the video dozens and dozens of times. So from about 2 o'clock to just about 3:14, it's going to be like a partial eclipse where we'll see the moon block more and more and more of the sun, but still only part of it. And then there's those great 3 minutes in the middle, beginning right at about the stroke of 3:14, when we'll be right in the moon's shadow and you get that totality effect. So in Mentor, it's going to last about 3 minutes and 49 seconds. Your times might vary by a few seconds if you're elsewhere in Lake County, not quite where the library is. But like I said, it'll be less than a minute's variation within anywhere in Lake County. Like I said, that eclipse is moving, the shadow's moving from southwest to northeast, and that's the general trend of Lake County. So you're going to get very similar viewing conditions throughout Lake County. And so if you're planning your viewing event, the partial phases of that eclipse at the beginning and the end, for the first 1 hour and 15 minutes and the last 1 hour and 15 minutes, that's when you're going to want to make sure you've got some kind of protection for your eyes to view that without causing, damage to your eyeballs. But the beautiful thing is, for those 3 minutes and 46 seconds in the middle during totality, you don't need any special equipment at all. The moon is your protection equipment. And you can take off any eyeglasses or goggles you're wearing and just look right up at the eclipse just during that totality phase. And then you'll want to put them back on for the partial phase at the end. Nice. Okay, now how long will totality last? The truth is, yeah, it'll vary by a few seconds, and a lot of folks tend to obsess over this detail of exactly how long they'll be in the moon's shadow. So here's our prediction of what the moon's shadow is going to look like when it hits Ohio, and it's not a perfect circle. The moon itself is a little bit lumpy, and just like a flashlight hitting something from an angle, our shadow is a little bit stretched out. And if you're closer to the middle of that shadow, you'll be in the shadow for a few seconds longer than somebody at the edge will. So if you're in the middle of the shadow, you'll get a slightly longer totality than people at the edges. But like I said, within Lake County, it's less than a minute's difference. I know some folks are doing what people do whenever there's an eclipse. They're trying to convince you that their eclipse is better than your eclipse, and by extension, that they're better than you. So, oh, our eclipse is going to last this many seconds. So, I know the folks in the city of Avon Lake are making a lot of hay out of the fact that their eclipse lasts 3 minutes and 53 seconds, whereas at the Menor Library, it's going to last 3 minutes and 49 seconds. So, like I said, if those few seconds difference are really important to you, by all means, you can travel to one of these other locations. But if you're thinking about travel, you might as well go to Oklahoma, where totality is going to last more than 4 minutes. So like I said, if you head a little bit southwest, you can catch more and more time in that shadow of the moon. Okay, so let's say you're planning viewing the eclipse from where you are in Lake County. Which way should you face? So this is in the afternoon in April. Yeah, so it'll be in the southwest from start to finish. If you've got a compass, that'll be maximum eclipse will be right at about 224 degrees. So this is always great if you're like saying, oh, I'll be in my front yard or my backyard, and you realize, oh no, wait, there's a huge tree blocking my view, or there's a tall building blocking my view to the southwest. This is where you might pick where you're going to do your viewing from. And then if you're wondering how high in the sky the eclipse will be, here's my handy cartoon way of visualizing this. So if right on the horizon to flat straight ahead is 0 degrees and straight up is 90 degrees, the eclipse is going to be just over halfway up the sky at about 48 degrees high. And for me, that's high enough that you actually have to remember to tilt your head back. So this is why I like to joke, my second favorite piece of eclipse viewing equipment after a viewing device is a rocking chair. Because I like to be able to lean back if I'm going to watch the sun for 2.5 hours that high in the sky. Like I said, bring yourself a chair. Otherwise, you're going to get eclipse neck from tilting your head up the whole time. And so then just last year, to give folks a sense of this, I went out at the exact same date and time that the eclipse is going to happen, 3:14 p.m. on April the 8th. And I got a picture of where the sun was in the sky. And this shows two cool things. One, it shows you just how high it was. This is, there's a phone pole in here for scale. So like I said, it's going to be up above most of the trees and telephone poles. And unless you've got very tall buildings to the southwest of you, it'll be above most buildings. I like this because it also showed that we had perfect eclipse viewing weather last April the 8th. Ah, it was sunny and clear. It was great. If only it's going to be like that on Monday. Here's keeping fingers crossed. Good stuff. Okay, let's say you want to view the eclipse safely. Here are some tips on how to do that. Because, yeah, this is one of those other things where people like to overcomplicate it and make it seem a lot more confusing than it is. But the truth is, staring at the sun for 2.5 hours is going to be a bad idea to do with just your eyeballs any day of the year. I don't know anybody who's ever stared at the sun for 2.5 hours and not come away with a sunburn on the inside of their eyeballs. And so, like I said, if you've ever had a sunburn on your skin, you know how annoying that and painful that can be. So you can imagine having a sunburn on the inside of your eye, on the retina that does the seeing at the back of your eye. That can cause some serious vision problems for you. So like I said, but it's pretty easy to take a few safety precautions so that you can watch the sun throughout the entire eclipse. And I love this photo, again, from that 2017 eclipse viewing event. So if you look at it, it's got the standard, eclipse viewing crowd. They've got their goggles on. They're looking up at the sun. But if you look towards the bottom right corner, and I'm going to try and circle this, there's what looks to be a child about under the age of 10. And they're having one of the great pitfall reactions that you need to watch out for if you're helping kids view the eclipse. And he's yanking off his goggles with like a I can't see anything face. And yes, the great thing about eclipse viewing goggles is they let you look at the sun safely. The bad thing about them is they block so much light that they're basically a pair of blindfolds for anything that isn't as bright as the sun. And I'll toss mine on here. Ooh, they're nice and stylish. But you're right, it can be a little bit disorienting. So for adults, that's usually not a problem. We know, oh, okay, we'll use that to look at the sun, and I'll just block out my camera with them. But you can imagine if you're, under the age of 10 and suddenly an adult has shoved this blindfold onto your face, you can be a little disoriented. So yeah, I can help to let them know they won't see anything until they look straight up at the sun using their eye safety goggles. Good stuff. Because after all, we don't want the kids to miss out on all of their eclipse viewing just because they got confused about their goggles. And we're also going to share some non-goggle viewers, which I think are some really great ways to watch the sun that don't get as much press. Nowadays, people like to obsess over where to get the eclipse goggles. And there's some nifty ways you can watch the sun using other methods. All right, let's get to it. So you'll need eye safety just for that first hour and 15 minutes and that last hour and 15 minutes. During the actual totality, the 3 minutes and 46 seconds, if you're in Mentor, no eye protection is needed. And this is another pitfall you've got to watch out for is if you're helping kids under the age of 10, they might just keep their goggles on and miss the whole 3 minutes and 46 seconds of totality because they're wearing blindfolds. So what I recommend is, as you notice totality is approaching, if you've got your clock, once it gets to be very close to 3:14, go ahead. Yeah. Take a look down around you at your feet. And then as soon as you notice that your feet are in the moon's shadow, because like I said, that shadow is going to sweep in at more than 2,000 miles an hour. Suddenly you notice, oh, I'm in the moon's shadow. It's totally safe around me. You can whip off those goggles and look straight up at the eclipse. No safety goggles needed for those 3 minutes and 40 seconds that the moon becomes our safety goggles. And then once the sun peeks out from behind the moon again, you'll want to put your goggles or other safety methods back into effect. Nice. And then you can watch the partial solar eclipse for the next hour and 15 minutes at the end. Good times. So these are people a lot of times will ask, well, do we recommend certain eclipse goggles or others? These are 3 manufacturers that I unequivocally recommend. And they make a lot of the ones that you'll see distributed at places like libraries and parks. Like I said, these are the big 3 of American eclipse manufacturers. Sometimes everybody knows somebody who's got a horror story about getting phony baloney goggles that turned out to be junk. And I did like this. I was at a conference this is for science teachers. And one of the science teachers was enough of an adult to admit that they had been taken in by one of these too good to be true schemes. And his story was essentially, yeah, I wanted to get eclipse goggles. And I went to obviousscam.virus and they were offering suspiciously cheap eclipse goggles. And he bought them and they turned out to be, unusable junk. And so, like I said, if you're getting them from any kind of a reliable manufacturer, they'll say that they're ISO certified. I'll hold up the certification there, that it's been inspected to be nice and safe for you to look through. Like I said, the ones that you buy out of the back of somebody's car, maybe not so much, but any one of these ones made here. And I'll put in a plug for this. This is a truly great opportunity. In 2017, the United States kind of ran low on eclipse viewing goggles. People around the country kind of underestimated how many people would be excited about watching the eclipse. So we learned our lesson from that. And this time around, thanks to the good graces and deep pockets of the Moore Foundation, there are millions of eclipse goggles available through public libraries all through the zone of the eclipse. And I love the name. It's called Solar Eclipse Activities for Libraries, or SEAL. And they've got an adorable cartoon seal for a logo. So like I said, if you've gotten eclipses from a library, it may be a part of this program. It's a really great way to get goggles into people's hands. But okay, enough with the goggles. They're great, but let's try something else. If you want to do it yourself, you can do it the way your grandparents did. I'm not a big fan of this, but you can try it. You can make a pinhole viewer. Yeah. And I like to joke, yes, they sort of kind of work. They're not the best way to view an eclipse, but they're better than nothing, and they are easy to build. So like I said, odds are if your grandparents might have viewed an eclipse this way, you take a dark chamber, or another great science word for it is an obscured chamber, a camera obscura, which is just a fancy word for a dark room. And your dark room can be as small as a cardboard box, and then you poke one tiny pinhole in it to let in just a little bit of light. And one of the handy ways to do that is poke through a little bit of aluminum foil. Or if you know anybody who does some home repairs and they've got that great aluminum foil adhesive tape that people use for insulation, that stuff is perfect for this use. And you want to poke a teeny tiny pinhole in it, hold that up in the sun, and then cut another hole so that you can look into the dark box. and you can almost sort of kind of see a small picture of the eclipse on the other side of the box. It's okay. It's fine. If you know somebody's going to try this, you can watch out for one construction technique that a lot of young kids make is they get carried away making that pinhole. And the truth is, you want that pinhole to be as small as possible. The smaller it is, the clearer and more focused your image will be. A lot of kids will just stab a hole in it with a pencil and make a gigantic gaping hole. No, no, you want the smaller the hole, the better your picture will be. The downside to this is only one person can use it at a time, and it's still a very small view of the eclipse. It doesn't magnify it at all. And I'll confess, my eyesight is poor enough. I need the large print version of an eclipse. So much better than non-magnifying cardboard glasses or the barely magnifying cardboard box. My personal favorite are some of these other techniques. If you think outside the box, you can take that pinhole trick and make it a little bit bigger. So if you hold one part of your pinhole up in the sun and then get a friend to hold another piece of paper farther away in your shadow, you can make that picture of the eclipse a little bit bigger every step you take farther away from your pinhole. There's kind of a trade-off here. The farther away your screen paper is from your pinhole, the bigger your picture will be, but it also makes it dimmer. So eventually, if you go far enough away, it'll be so dim that you can barely see your image anymore. So that's one way to make it a little bit bigger. But another one is to go bigger. And this is one of those tricks that's so old it feels new again. This is the old-timey version of viewing an eclipse that folks used to use in like one-room schoolhouses back in the 1800s. And that's, well, if you're going to do this camera obscura, this dark room technique, don't use a tiny little box. Use an actual room. Use your house or your garage. If you can put a small mirror outside in the sunshine and then bounce the picture of the sun onto the wall someplace dark, like say through a window and into your house, or I've done this at my house where I put a mirror in my front yard and I shone a picture of the sun across the street into my neighbor's garage across the way. And it makes a giant picture of the sun. This is a picture of my coworker, Nora, standing next to a picture of the sun that's about the size of a clock on the wall. And it's all from a teeny tiny little mirror, about a 1/4 inch square that we put outside of the basement that she's standing in. So it's about 80 feet away. And the farther you shine that picture, the bigger and clearer your picture of the moon will be. So it's one of those tricks that's, like I said, pretty simple and easy to do, and everybody can see it at once. And then you can also, hold up your cell phone and take a little picture of it right there on the wall. So it's something that you can share with a group. It's a great way to watch the partial phases of the eclipse at the beginning and the end. So to do this, if you want to try, there's 2 ways. You can either get your hands on a small mirror. I really like to go to the craft store and they'll sell you tiny mirrors for like do-it-yourself disco ball crafts. But those are also perfect for projecting pictures of the sun. Or you can take a regular size mirror, like I'm holding up this shaving mirror from my bathroom, and I've used this as well. If you cover it up with masking tape, all except for a little square about the size as your smallest fingernail, that size, you could use that to project your picture of the sun in through your window onto your wall and get a very nice view of the sun. So like I said, that's one of those techniques that's super easy, but it doesn't get a lot of press. My hunch is that it's a lot easier to tell tourists who are traveling to see eclipses to build a cardboard box and carry it with them than it is to just tell people, hey, the eclipse is coming to you. Use your house, use the building that you're in, and just put a little mirror outside and get a nice picture of the eclipse that way. It's a good technique. All right, if you're like me and you want a little magnification, here's another technique you can try. If you've got a pair of binoculars, you've got a week, and you can make this, to whip up a nifty contraption that lets you project an image of the sun using your binoculars. Now, for heaven's sake, please do not ever point your binoculars at the sun and then put your eyeballs behind them. Because you can imagine what might happen if you put a lens in the sunlight and put your eyeball behind it. Yes, that's a great way to start a campfire without matches, but it's a terrible, terrible way to try and look at the sun. So please, please, please don't ever try to look at the sun through binoculars. Instead, we're going to do what these folks are doing. If you turn your back to the sun, point the binoculars over your shoulder at the sun, and you can shine a magnified picture of the sun a few feet away onto a piece of paper. And my favorite way to do this is with, well, bolting your binoculars to a stick and then taping a clipboard to the other end so that you've got a nice steady way to hold your binoculars and a nice steady piece of paper that you can see. And these are folks using this to view a past partial eclipse at Observatory Park. It's a great technique. And like I said, even the younger boy on the right side photo is making it work. You can hold it just like it's a trombone, point at the sun over your shoulder, and then you've got, like I said, a magnified picture of the sun that multiple people can look at. People can take snapshots. It's great. We even put plans on how to do this online if you want to follow step by step. It's a pretty easy building technique. It's a fun project. All right, if you've got a telescope, you probably don't need me to tell you this, but there are a lot of handy ways to safely project the image from your telescope onto a piece of fabric. That's what we're doing here. And ours is a very high-tech method where we just plugged a plastic funnel into the back of the telescope and stretched movie theater screen over the end of it. And it gives a nice picture of the sun right there on the fabric that's safe for everybody to see and photograph, and nobody gets their eyes barbecued. It's a great technique. We'll wipe our brows. You are now experts on how to view an eclipse safely. I wanted to give one last little brief section on what to expect during totality. So here are two actual real photos during the same eclipse during totality, but one is, they're both trying to give you a sense of how dark it gets during totality. And the one on the left is taken by, a photographer who zoomed in on the actual sun and moon themselves. And so when you set your cameras to pick up something that dim, it tends to make the rest of the sky look darker than it really is. And on the right is kind of a cell phone snapshot of the total solar eclipse, which tends to make it look a little bit brighter than it really is. So if you want to, what to expect when you're expecting an eclipse, it's somewhere in between these two levels of darkness. Like I said, I like to compare it to nighttime, but nighttime when there's a full moon. Even with the moon blocking it, the outer atmosphere of the sun casts enough light that there's still some twilight around us. But it is dark enough that you can see things that you don't normally see during the daytime. Like in this case, there's a planet visible right up in the sky during daytime. And so we're expecting that. We're expecting at least 2 planets to be visible up in the sky during totality. So I wanted to give you a tip on what to expect there. So here's our simulated view of this April's eclipse using a planetarium. So it'll get reasonably dark. We'll probably be able to see at least 2 planets, probably a few stars here and there. Nice. But I wanted to make sure you're on the lookout for, if we take a closer look, some of the other goodies that'll be up in the sky. So if this is our eclipse right here where the sun is blocking the moon, I guarantee off to the left of it, you'll get a chance to see a bright planet, and that's the biggest planet in the whole solar system. It's Jupiter. And then off to the right will be a very bright planet, and it's the only planet named after a lady. It's
Venus.
Venus. Nice. Those are the ones I guarantee you'll be able to see. Truth is, planets Saturn and Mars will also be up during totality, but they're going to be very low. So if you keep going to the right past Venus, they're going to be pretty low. For a lot of us, they'll probably be blocked by trees and buildings and such. But if you catch 2 more planets, pat yourself on the back. That'll be Saturn and Mars. If you know any really avid astronomers, they might be talking about trying to catch a glimpse of a comet during totality. This is kind of a niche thing to do, but if you've got binoculars and you want to try and look for this comet, it's called Comet Pons-Brooks. It will be much too faint for any of us to see with just our eyeballs. But if you want to try and search above and to the right of Jupiter with binoculars during totality, you might be able to catch a glimpse of that comet. Personally, I don't think that's the best way to spend our 3 minutes and 46 seconds in darkness is chasing after a comet. But hey, however you want to spend your eclipse. Nice. Whew, wipe your brows there. Now you're experts on what to expect during totality. And so for our last bit, before I totally run out of time, I wanted to bring up, of course, the big question, the weather. Oh, what will the weather be like on Monday, April 8th? How much of this eclipse are we actually going to get to see? And so this is a snapshot of what the weather has been like in Ohio on April the 8th. in the years 2017, when it was a great year for viewing an eclipse, and 2018, another great year for viewing an eclipse. 2019, that was a little too cloudy. That would have not been a great April 8th for seeing the eclipse. But same with the April 8ths of 2020 and 2021 and 2023. So like I said, about 5 out of the past 6 years, there's been great eclipse viewing weather on April the 8th. That doesn't guarantee that we're going to get good or bad weather this April. So like I said, this is April. Any weather conditions are possible. None of them are certain. So if you know any grumpy Gus's in your neighborhood who are like, oh, it's just going to be cloudy. It's like, well, it might be cloudy. But the truth is, even a cloudy eclipse can be a fun experience. Here's a snapshot I took of a very cloudy partial solar eclipse. And the sun is bright enough that it can punch through quite a bit of clouds. And even if it's completely cloudy, 100% and raining that day, it's still going to get dark as night for that 3 minutes and 46 seconds during the total solar eclipse. And then, yeah, I'll be watching it on TV, same as the rest of you, if it turns out to be that kind of a weathery day.